A world-class musician, composer, arranger, and educator, Diego Rivera has entertained audiences for over 20 years. Known for his muscular tone and unique blend of straight-ahead mainstream jazz fused with music inspired by his Latino background and heritage, he currently holds a tenured appointment as Associate Professor of Jazz Saxophone at Michigan State University, where he's also serving as Associate Director of Jazz Studies. He was born in Ann Arbor and raised just up the road in East Lansing. Born into a Mexican-American family, his Chicano heritage has always been important to him and shaped his creative endeavors. His parents named him after the famed muralist Diego Rivera. A trip to the Detroit Institute of Arts at a young age inspired him to make his own mark as an artist, not with the brush, rather with the saxophone. He attended Michigan State University, where he studied with Branford Marsalis, Ron Blake, and Rodney Whitaker. In '99, he began his professional and touring career with the Jimmy Dorsey Orchestra and their big band. Since that maiden voyage, he's performed concerts at the most prestigious venues and festivals across the United States, Canada, Europe, and Asia. He's also toured extensively with Juno Award-winning Canadian jazz vocalist Sophie Millman. Currently, he performs with and leads his own group, the Diego Rivera Quartet. He's also a member of the Rodney Whitaker Quartet, the Ulysses Owens New Century Big Band, the Jazz at Dr. Phillips Center Orchestra, and the Gathering Orchestra. He's also performed with artists such as Ellis Marsalis, Kurt Elling, Christian McBride, Wycliffe Gordon, the Prism Saxophone Quartet, the Gerald Wilson Big Band, Lincoln Center Afro-Latin Jazz Orchestra, and many more. Rivera has several credits to his name as a recording artist, composer, and arranger. His newest project, Connections, was released in the summer of 2019 on Positone Records. Rivera's debut recording, Hercules, and his sophomore release, The Contender, are available along with Connections for purchase on his website. The Contender received national critical acclaim, reaching the top 10 on Jazzweek radio charts. He's also appeared on several recordings as a sideman on Positone, Mack Avenue, and Detroit Music Factory record labels. An avid composer and arranger, Rivera has written arrangements for various recordings, projects, and artists, most notably for Jazz at Lincoln Center's Motor City Jazz Concert, a tribute to the music and musicians of Detroit. His arranging work can be heard on recordings by Carl Allen, Rodney Whitaker, Ulysses Owens Jr., the New Century Quintet, and Michael Dees. Rivera is a passionate educator who believes to be a jazz musician is to be a jazz educator. He has presented master classes at schools and universities, both in the United States and abroad. In 2019, he was awarded the Dorotha J. and John D. Withrow Teaching Award, the Michigan State University College of Music's highest honor for excellence in teaching and scholarly achievement. He is musical director for the award-winning jazz ensemble MSU Jazz Octet 1, which is the College of Music's premier jazz combo made up of the Jazz Studies program's most talented student musicians. Several of Professor Rivera's former students enjoy careers as professional musicians performing with artists such as Wynton Marsalis and Jazz at Lincoln Center, the Birdland Big Band, the Count Basie Orchestra, the Diva Jazz Orchestra, and multi-Grammy award-winning group Snarky Puppy. Well, first of all, welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
What have you been up to during quarantine?
Oh boy, it's been so long that it's actually happening in phases now. My first phase of quarantine was like a lot of people in my position, doing a lot of online teaching, remote instruction. It was a lot like building a plane as you were flying it. So, I mean, there were some things that I learned from that were actually pretty cool. And there were some things that I think I'll actually carry over when we get back into in-person, if we ever, get back in person, soon. I mean, I think
Yes.
I'm going to have another round of remote instruction before we go back to in-person. There's just some things about, the way the students responded, and be happy to talk about those. And then the second phase, kind of like after school had gotten out, was spent just kind of assessing where we were, assessing what was happening, kind of preparing for summer. Gigs obviously were vacated en masse.
Mm-hmm.
And, just kind of figuring out how to keep myself motivated, which actually I found was not really hard at all to come to the instrument and to play. I haven't been doing a lot of writing or arranging. I think that'll come as we get closer to the school year. But man, I've been doing nothing but practicing and playing and
Yeah.
learning. And it's been really, because I never get a chance to do that. I never get a chance to practice like this. Then I guess the most recent phase recently in the last couple of weeks has just been kind of figuring out what we're going to do as we go back to school and as, we think about sending our kids back to school, how we're going to deal with that. So, and it seems like with every phase of the quarantine, the disease kind of starts to creep in on you. You start to
Yeah.
know more and more people, and it gets closer and closer and closer. And so I think that's kind of made us a little bit more guarded, and kind of want to isolate a little bit more. And so, yeah, I think it's been long enough that I think you can start talking about, well, the first phase of the quarantine, the second phase of the quarantine, the third,
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's been kind of just doing the same thing, since March. I don't think our lives are set up that way. That was the tough thing, is that our life was set up, and we had set up our own lives, and not our life was set up. We had set up our own lives to be doing so many different things. From week to week, you could be doing completely different projects, completely different things, and a week would seem like an eternity. And then that was all taken away from us. That was all kind of stopped. So we had to kind of change the way that we think. And I think mentally that's really taken a toll, especially on people that are used to doing jumping from one project to the next, finding comfort or being able to avoid things, or I mean, however you want to look at it, just kind of getting used to doing something every single day or every single week, or, so I think that's been the biggest adjustment for everybody, being forced to fall into a daily routine that looks eerily or uncomfortably similar to the thing that you did, not
Yeah.
even yesterday, but last week, last month.
You said that you're not having any problems with motivation, it seems. Can you talk about why you think that may be?
I mean, I love music. I always have. And I never get this sort of time. I never get this sort of time just to focus on one thing or actually investigate. I think the fact that I teach, I encourage students to get deep into material. And I think that motivates me. I get excited about that. I get excited about talking about, the different layers of a musician, the different layers of music, the different layers of understanding consciousness, and the different levels of turning around, weaponizing that knowledge to do whatever it is that you want to do. And I get excited about that. I just never get the opportunity to fully go through the process myself. So there are things that I've been putting off for a long time that I just don't have the time to commit. I think consistency is really important with practicing. I mean, I think you get more out of practicing an hour a day than you do 8 hours in one day. Consistency has always been a big kind of obstacle for me, just because I have so many things that pull me away from that. So being able to practice a couple hours, a few hours was great, and I was able to get into a lot of things that I kind of had put off or had never really gotten into or just never really had the time. It'd always been on my list. And the caveat is I need to play for any of it to make sense.
Yeah.
So there's really no telling how much it's going to change my playing in the short term, or I've been at this long enough to know that it may not even show up in the long term. But I've done enough, and I've gone through the process enough of listening, absorbing, kind of understanding, and then just waiting, and then it'll come out. Sometimes the music that I be into, or the music that I'll be studying, is very different than the music that I'm actually playing, or the music that I'm spending my time playing. So there's no outlet for the things that I'm studying. If I'm studying a handful of Lester Young and Coleman Hawkins solos, but I'm spending a lot of time playing more contemporary styles, there's not really going to be an outlet for it. But I'm fine with that. When I get back into the situation where I'm playing standards or someplace where I have an outlet for it, it usually kind of jumps out. And everything has been that way. So I've done this long enough so that I believe in the process and I have confidence in the process. So I'm doing all this great work, but I don't really have any expectations that it's going to make me sound any different immediately. I really need to play in order to see the fruits of this labor. And I'm totally fine with that. And that's always made me more confident, made me more eager just to learn, because I understand that the process is kind of like its own thing. That part of the process, how this is going to come out. I don't necessarily see it as a one-to-one relationship. Like if I learn this solo, I'll have new licks. I may not, if I wanted to, I could, but that's not necessarily why I get into things. A lot of it's knowledge based. The knowledge will come out other ways.
It makes sense that you're the pedagogy professor at State, because like the way that you're talking about approaching your practices the same way that you teach your students. I don't think I've ever thought of pedagogy as an art until I met you, to be honest.
Wow, thanks.
And you're just like such an excellent instructor, and you start off by teaching people how also to be excellent instructors. So in the vein of pedagogy, can you start off with like that pedagogy class and what you think is the most important part of teaching music?
Again, it's phases. When I started, it was real autobiographical. Like, these are the things that I'm doing, that I'm learning to do as well. Because when I started to teach the pedagogy class, I think we had somebody originally that was supposed to teach it. And Prof. Whitaker, I think it was in my second or third year, Prof. Whitaker had asked me if I wanted to teach it. And I said, sure. I had no idea. There was a really good text that I used, and I learned a lot from that. And then I started to kind of get more textbooks in there, and then kind of stray away from that. I've always had the desire to write a pedagogy book. But what I found is that, it's really important that people develop their own style of pedagogy. And that's not to be confused with their own principles of pedagogy, because there are some things that fundamentally work. The way that they carry them out needs to be personal.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, students sometimes wrestle with, well, if I can change the delivery, how come I can't choose my own principles? Kind of stripping somebody of somebody's dignity is not really a good principle. I don't care. Well, I want to strip them of their dignity. I want to be harsh. I want to be, belligerent. And, that's good. It doesn't necessarily really, in my experience, it doesn't work. And in that class, I preface that a lot with almost everything I say. If you you guys taking it, I'm usually preface everything with like, well, in my experience, this is, but I usually preface the experience. I preface the delivery. I don't preface listening. I don't say, well, in my experience, listening is important. I think in most everybody's experience, listening is important.
Yeah.
In my experience, this is how I get students to listen, high school students to listen. In my experience, this is how I set up my structure for lessons. I think structure in lessons is something that's good. How you deliver that structure, how you deliver that organization. I think organization in general is good. How you set that up and how flexible you are in that organization is really personal. The most important thing is to separate what's kind of principle versus what's personal.
Could you actually elaborate on one of those points? This is something I brought up in Professor Whitaker's interview. And then this is something that just stood out to me in general that you told me once, because I had asked you for advice on a student. And I said something, they weren't how do I like deal with it or whatever. And the first thing you told me is like, you can't take someone's dignity, or you have to let them keep their dignity, give them dignity. Can you elaborate on what that means?
Another colleague of mine, I'd never been able to kind of like put it into words, but Reggie Thomas, who was an incredible jazz educator, jazz pianist, all around, just great guy. I have tremendous respect for him. He said, don't say anything, don't point out a problem if you're not willing to help solve it. And I thought about that. So I try to, I'm not always successful. I try not to criticize unless I'm going to get in there and help with the solution. Because if a student, if they hear nothing but criticisms and then kind of like no outlet, depending on the student, I could take that. I actually, it's not that I don't mind, but I could take it because I was always inquisitive. I always asked a lot of questions, and I like learning things and figuring things out. I like solving problems. But sometimes not everybody's like that. If a student feels like they have no way out, or they can't see a pathway out, then, it becomes very hard for them to stay interested in music. That really does a number on their confidence. And if a musician doesn't have confidence, it's rough. You guys know, when you're not feeling confident about anything or not feeling confident about your playing, it's hard to even pick up the horn to solve the issue. And that's the worst thing. If I can criticize but offer instruction, and furthermore, if students know that I'm actually just being honest, then I think they understand that I'm not doing things to diminish their character or to take away from anything musical. I'm not trying to trick them or play these mind games. I'm actually trying to help them. I don't necessarily tell students they sound sad if I don't think they sound sad. It's not like a tick. Well, that's sad. Well, you got to work on this. Well, you need to shed. It's like, it's not a tick. If I actually think they need to shed, I'll tell them. Yeah. And I tell them a lot of things. It's very rare that I tell a student that they're sad. That's hard to believe for some people that know me. But I actually very rarely, if ever, have told somebody like, look, man, your stuff is sad, or that was sad. I'll take a lot of observations, but also hopefully provide a lot of solutions or a lot of alternatives.
Mm-hmm.
And by the same point, if something's really killing, I'll let them know. But at least they know that I'm being honest. If something is just where it needs to be, sometimes I won't say anything, or sometimes, yeah, keep it up or keep doing it. If it's killing, be like, man, that was burning. If it wasn't happening, it was like, well, we got to get your time together, or we need to get,
Yeah.
you got to watch your pitch on that high F, or, we got to line up that tongue with your fingers, and that motivates a student. If you take somebody's dignity away, if you take away their feeling of self-worth, I mean, it's a non-starter. You can't get them to do anything. They're not going to listen to you, and they won't do anything for you because they feel like you're leading them astray, or they don't feel like you're a resource. And it's complicated. Mentorship can be messy. Mentorship can be kind of rough and kind of be messy, but hopefully you get enough time with the students for them to understand the method, because I've seen students that only get criticism. Like, I had a student come into our program, and it was hard for them to take criticism from me, I think because they weren't used to instruction being followed with it. So they saw it as ingenuous. And then I had a realization, like close to the end of the first year, I said to them, I said, man, do you realize that the only time you smile when you're talking about music, the only time you're happy about music is when you talk about the times you went off on?
Damn.
I was like, the only time you like smile is when you tell me a story about how somebody went off on you. I said, that's not what this is, bro. That's not what this is. And it's not overly sensitive, or it's not disingenuous when I tell you you're doing well, and it's equally honest when I tell you, you have some things that you could do better or you need to work on. And it was a real turning point, and he struggled with that for a little while. There was some deep thought in that, because he had become accustomed to just having his dignity taken from him. It was hard for him to kind of solve certain things, and it was hard for him to face certain things because, he was led to believe that there was just certain things that he was just never going to do. And that's not right. In some situations, I think I take students that have a lot to get together just because, sometimes just for the simple fact, like, who am I to stand in somebody's way of their dream of playing music? I need to do everything that I can. If it doesn't work out, it's definitely not going to be from a lack of trying and a lack of trying to motivate them. This is something that they really want. I'm going to be there. I'm not going to lie to them. They need to know that there's some honesty in their journey. Learning to play music and becoming a musician, there's a lot of, we raise an eyebrow because we don't know if we're being given the straight poop. So it's important for me, for them to know that I'm honest with them, or that they're going to get some honest feedback.
Yeah.
Good or bad. And they know if they send me something, or they, check this out, be like, that's killing. That's it. That's the end of the conversation. They're all right. He thinks it's killing. He's not trying to value. He's not, all right, good. So I think dignity is big with me.
So a term that I wasn't very familiar with until I started sort of my MSU experience is mentorship. Mm-hmm. And specifically, I'm just curious what you think distinguishes the mentor experience.
Oh, I think, you get a lot of different mentors. There's a lot of different mentors for a lot of different things in your life. My mentors have been great guides. They're not going to walk the path for me, but they're going to show me the path to walk. My mentors have been people that I've been able to go to for advice, people that I've been able to go to just to get an honest take on certain aspects of my life, my career, my musicianship, my teaching, all those sort of things. And it's that, it's I think mentorship, there's a lot of respect for dignity. My mentors, I think respect me as somebody that's inquisitive and somebody that wants to learn and someone that wants an honest answer. And my mentors have told me, look, you're not doing enough, or look, you're doing too much of this, or you got to focus more on, you got to spread yourself out, or you got to focus in on this, or you got to do that, And then mentors have also been, well, why don't you try this? Why don't you try this? Or sometimes they just give me advice, experience. It's somebody that I've built a trust with, that they give sound advice on the things that I'm interested in, or the stages that I'm in. And it doesn't necessarily always have to be somebody older. Prof Charles is an incredible mentor, for a lot of things. I go to him, I respect him greatly for his musicianship and his career and his artistry and his voice, and man, it's incredible. It's incredible just to see how he operates and see, how he assembles things and how he thinks about things. So, Prof D's is only a few years younger than me, but an incredible mentor. in a lot of ways. And then there are folks that are much older than I am that have had a lot more experience. Like, Prof Whitaker, we're about 10 years apart, 9-10 years apart. And then Uncle G, has been just an incredible mentor for as long as I can remember, man. So yeah, I mean, mentorship is something that exists, and it carries on even after, the formal relationship is over. I mean, which is why, so many of our students stay in contact with the professors, because if, you have a mentor, you really have a mentor for life. And I think that's why, even outside of the university, even outside of MSU, a lot of our students build mentorship relationships, or build those relationships with their mentors, for life. Steve Wilson has always been an incredible mentor for Marcus. He came from a great high school program, so he knew how to kind of put that together. But I think by being at MSU, he also saw the power of mentorship and saw good examples in the model and framework for mentorship. So he knows how to gather mentors in his lives to provide some guidance, and to provide an example, and provide inspiration on what could be possible as a musician, as a person, as an artist, and educator, everything.
You started talking about the faculty members that you see as mentors. So I'm curious, how important do you think mentorship is within a faculty body?
Oh, I think it's incredibly important. Well, I mean, it's been incredibly important for us. I think that's part of what makes our faculty work. I think that's what each of the faculty members, I think that's what we all enjoy, is that we have an incredible amount of respect for one another. If anybody puts out a record, man, I'm listening to it. I'm constantly asking Prof Whitaker for advice on teaching and career and education and just living, man, just life. I talk with almost all the other faculty on a consistent basis. We talk about teaching and career and things that, we should be doing. And, they've offered me encouragement. I've offered them encouragement and advice. And I think that's what we enjoy about it. I think it's important. It's not necessarily always achievable. Mentorship also takes a commitment from both sides, which is why dignity is so important. If the dignity isn't there, it's hard to forge that relationship between mentor and mentee. You can't be a mentor to somebody that doesn't want to be mentored by you. Or it's hard to be a mentor. You may want to be a mentor, but it's hard to be a mentor to somebody that doesn't want to be mentored. I'm your mentor. No, you're not,
In regards to seeking out mentorship, or do you seek out, what's your advice for people who are looking for mentors or mentorship?
Honesty. Just coming at somebody honestly about what it is that you're interested in. And again, dignity and honesty are important. If you come at them respectfully. A funny story, I mean, even simple things. I was just raised to call my elders, by their surname, and they're, Mrs. So-and-so, Mr. So-and-so, Professor So-and-so. And until they tell me otherwise, Carl Allen was somebody that I have great respect for as a musician, as a professional, as a teacher. Man, he's incredible. And I've known him for a long time. And it was always Mr. Allen. Mr. Allen, it's good to see you. Mr. Allen, could you share some thoughts about this record? Mr. Allen, I'll see you at the session. Mr. Allen, I enjoy, And so we did this trip to Japan. I can't remember, 5-6 years, a few years ago. In an email, he asked, sent the formal thing. And I said, all right, thanks for the call, Mr. Allen. Looking forward to perform with you and Professor Whitaker. Mm-hmm. And then he writes me back in the email. He says, now, Diego, if you call me Mr. Allen one more time, I'm going to pull out your toenails.
Oh, my God.
So I reply, I was like, yeah, I need my toenails.
Yeah.
Carl. And Donald Walden was another one. Donald Walden is, oh, man. Checking him out here and there when, in the clubs and the concerts, and hearing him with Marcus and hearing him is oh. And so when it was one of my first years at Michigan State, and I was able to invite him up, to Michigan State as one of the guest artists for the Jazz Spectacular. And I called him, Mr. Walden. I said, who is this? And this is Diego Rivera. Oh, yeah, it's Donald. Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, so, we have this Jazz Spectacular. We'd love for you to come up and be a guest artist. And said, yeah, that sounds good. I call him a couple weeks later just to reconfirm, give him some details. So, hello, Mr. Walden. He goes, Donald, yeah, what's happening? And I was like, well, these are the details, and this is what's ever happened. Let me know when you get up here. We'll make sure everything's cool. And so we get backstage before the concert, and I'm going to thank him for his time, so Mr. Walden. And then he says, look, Mother Scratcher, it's Donald. So I'm sorry, So we had a good chuckle about that. But I could always ask them for advice, and just any of the cats. I mean, I was just, my respect was genuine. My honesty was in place, and it came from a good place. And I think that's gone a long way. I think I've been able to, just simple things, just respecting their dignity as a person. I mean, I know each one of these individuals is probably busy. I don't try to monopolize their time. And I think it has an opposite effect. I think people want to give their time to people who are respectful of theirs.
Yeah.
So if someone comes at me and says, like, I know you have a lot on your plate. I know you're very, very busy. Could I just ask you this one question? I'm probably more inclined to spend like more time with that person. You develop a nose for honesty, and you develop a nose for respect. And so, find the folks that you think that you can learn something from. Start there. Start there with honesty, start with dignity, start with respect, and start with an open mind, because, the answer they give you may not be the one that you're looking for, but it's what they're going to give you. In terms of teaching, that was always the hardest part for me, kind of changing subjects, but that was the hardest part for me, was learning how to deal with students that didn't necessarily do what you told them to do. And I found out that there was actually two types of those students. There were students that didn't do what you wanted to do and wanted to argue with you about why do I have to learn major scales? And if I didn't have a better answer than because I told you so, then they have a point, but then it forced me and said, well, why do they have to learn major scales? I said, well, it teaches you time, it teaches you harmony, it teaches you theory, it's great for articulation. You could turn it into an oral exercise, you can turn it into an ear training exercise. Theory, you understand the difference between A sharp and B flat, it's an arranging exercise, it's, learn about tonality. So, I had to build up kind of like a case for learning major scales. So I had to give it to them, and sometimes they'll accept it, or they'll just continue to fight you on it. And then there's other students, they won't take the information that you give them and use it, but they'll learn it. They'll learn it because they're good students, they'll learn, and that was kind of, and it's not to say that students shouldn't challenge you as a teacher or shouldn't, push you, but the student's first responsibility is to take in the information. And I was always that type of student. I never really had those types of questions. I never questioned the material. I had questions from my teachers, but I very rarely questioned the material, because I thought that was my role as a student, was just to learn it.
Yeah.
And if I wasn't getting it, there was something wrong with me. It wasn't something wrong with the teacher. The teacher obviously knew what they were doing. The teacher obviously knew the material. And there's sometimes, where I'll be like, oh, well, they don't really know it as well as even I do, so. But more often than not, if they would give me a material, I would just learn it. I would just learn it just because that was my role. And what I did with it, that was my choice. And so now I make sure that the students learn the material. I make sure that they learn the lessons, and I make sure that they get the information. What they do with it is completely up to them. That's not for me to determine. That's the beauty of music. That's the beauty of an art. You take in all this information and you put it together in your own unique way. Hopefully, if you're learning enough information from enough different sources, you come up with a code, or you come up with a combination that hopefully no one's ever come up with before. That helps, give you your own voice.
So I'm curious, because you're part of the committee of diversity on Michigan State, and you're committed to diversity. So just to start, can you talk to us about what being committed to diversity looks like?
You really have to observe, and you really have to learn to celebrate differences. You have to be a champion for things that you see that are different from yourself. It's not enough just to say, I respect that, but I think, I celebrate diversity. I really celebrate diversity. Like I really enjoy the things that are very different from myself, And I think that comes from, I always had kind of like a strong foundation for who I was.
Yeah.
I went to Michigan State, and I met a lot of students that were, Mexican American and Chicano, that got to that realization when they got to school. I never really had that identity crisis. So it made me more inquisitive, and it made me more curious about things that were totally different from me. That's part of it.
Yeah.
That's part of it. Having said that, this is kind of like a similar vein. So I'm not necessarily coming from an identity crisis when it comes to diversity. I think it's wonderful what we have at Michigan State. in terms of our program, in terms of our faculty. But the thing is, man, I don't want this to be the exception.
Yeah.
These aren't the sort of accolades that I want. Why isn't this happening everywhere? We're incredible. We have enough to be noteworthy about. We have enough to be highlighted for. You know, musically, we're in one of the best faculty, and we have an incredible environment, you know, that's welcoming and inclusive and encouraging. Our students can play. Our students are successful when they leave. You know, it's a wonderful program. The fact that it's diverse, I'm fine with surrendering that, in the sense that we're not the only program that has diversity or like promotes or celebrates diversity in the way that we do.
Yeah.
I want it everywhere. And it's kind of deep, man. I get some pushback sometimes from people that talk about diversity, and sometimes that's what they identify with. And I understand that because they're committed to it, and you know, but if it becomes something that everybody's doing, they kind of lose their identity as a person that promotes diversity. That's not really like their moniker, their identifier anymore, because everybody is doing it. And I understand that because it's their life's work, but that every time I see, and it's very rare that I see that, you know, I'm just thankful that we're not like that. I think as a faculty, we'd be thrilled if we saw more programs that were as diverse as ours, or put together like ours, or doing the type of work in the community and trying to serve underserved populations, and trying to bring the music to rural areas, to the inner city, you know, celebrating women, celebrating Black music, celebrating Latino music, celebrating music is, you know, just on a wide array of music, musicians, programming. We do it, and we do it well. I think the fact that we do it well is what I'm so impressed by. The fact that we're doing it shouldn't be impressive. Everybody should be doing this. And I think we're okay if we're not the only people programming like this, celebrating music like this. You know, we're okay. We're fine if we're not the ones that say, look, Michigan State is doing it. I want to be the ones to be like, look, Michigan State does it the best.
Hey, yeah.
Ooh, there it is.
You know, I don't want to be the only one. We just want to be the best.
So we talked about pedagogy. We're talking about diversity a little bit. I do want to come back to it afterwards, but I want to talk about like more like the performance aspect of your career. So you're based in Michigan, right? But you travel. You're like in a contracted band in Florida. You travel. You come to New York pretty often. Like, you travel a lot, and your career is expansive. First of all, can you talk to us about how you balance being in all these things, and then being like the busiest full-time professor of the world that I've ever, like,
The world.
you're always like in a project, you're always doing something. How do you balance all of this?
I don't.
That's not the answer that we need. We all need it.
there isn't, though. I mean, I got to be honest with you guys, man. I love you guys. So it's like, you know, sometimes I fall short. I think I'd be very worried if I got to a point and be like, okay, yeah, I got it. It's balanced, you know. And again, this is just me. This is the way my crazy mind thinks. You know, it's just like, okay, this is enough time to avoid my family. This feels good.
Yeah.
You know, this is enough time for me to surrender. Because, man, there's no balance. There's no balance in this. There's no balance. You do the best that you can. I think that's important. You have to do the very best that you can. I'm sure up to me, man, it's like I wouldn't do anything, man. I just, you know, spend all day with my family and my kids. You know, I like my kids. You know, I like hanging out with them. They're fun. Love my wife. You know, we have a good time together. Love my family. But I love playing. You know, if I could spend every waking hour playing, it'd be great. But that means I'd have to, you know, and I love teaching. I love my job at Michigan State and outside the walls, you know, teaching and all, you know, so there's no real balance. I do the best that I can. The balance in my life is really just making the effort to achieve balance, which I know isn't necessarily achievable, but it's a lot like music, you know. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I practice towards a goal that's not necessarily achievable, but it's the effort that I think I learned from. It's the journey that I learned from. Yeah. You know, finding the balance, you know, having balance is not really necessarily something that I don't think is achievable, but like trying to figure it out, I think is what I'm learning a lot more from.
You play in like bands like with Ulysses Owens, Rodney. You play with Rodney a lot, actually, not just in the big band, but like, can you talk about how do you behave on a bandstand? And then can you talk about how that's different with how you approach when it's a project led by you?
Well, Rodney's gigs pay better than my gigs. So I order a bigger steak after Rodney's mine. No, I mean, not much different. I don't think so. I mean, there's still things that, I mean, Rodney told me one time, he says, yeah, it's my band, but you still need to lead. You still need to, you're responsible for the melody, and you're responsible for, when you're improvising, it's your melody.
Yeah.
So he needs me to stand out front. When it's my band, the music is different. I write a lot more. I would say probably 90% of the tunes that I do on gigs are all my tunes, whereas before it was a lot less. The message is a little bit different. The narrative, the story, the experience is a little bit different. The tunes that I put together for a gig, I try to make them tell a story, and I try to have a message. It's a show. It's still a show, and there can be morals to the show, and there can be some information and entertainment and all that sort of stuff, but it's still a show. I try to put together music in a story on a gig, and one tune leads into another, and it hopefully tells a story. It's not just calling tunes. So the story's a little bit different, but my approach is still the same. I mean, once we're into the tune, I don't play my tune any different than I play Rodney's tune, in terms of like an approach, or I don't play Dr. Phillips' chair any different than I play Ulysses' chair. I mean, I'm trying to play as best as I can. So, at a certain point, it has to be made simple, and it gets reduced to the things that are fundamental to the music. It's like, I got to be in time. I got to play with a good sound. I got to be expressive. I have to listen. I have to play with good intonation. I have to follow my lead player. I think those are the fundamental things that allow me to tell the sort of story that I want to. So it gets very micro for me when I'm on a gig. It gets very, what are the basic elements? It's just us in the room, just the band in the room, and that kind of like gets projected outwards towards the audience. So it's not a whole lot different for me. I try to play it as best as I can. Because if Rodney's hiring me, or if I'm hiring myself, I want to be able to hire myself. Well, the Diego Rivera Quartet, somebody else.
Can you talk about what it means for you? What does it mean to be a professional musician?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think somebody that's your craft, that's your vocation as a musician, that's what you spend your time doing. There are various stages of being a professional musician. When you're starting out, maybe you have a couple other things to support your business, business being you have a couple of streams of income. All successful business people have more than one stream of income. So I don't understand why, sometimes, students or sometimes young musicians, feel bad about having a couple of different streams of income. So while I'm also working this day job, but I want to be a musician, and, I'm also, doing some web sites, but, I really want to do that. It was like, man, every successful person in the world has more than one stream of income. It's like, I don't see why a musician should be any different. So a professional musician, sometimes people are lucky enough to only do just play. Just all they do is just sit by the phone and wait for the phone to ring, and they just jump on planes and they play gigs and, eat catered chicken and rice medley and field greens every day, and, just sleep in a hotel and go to, it's multifaceted, especially now. I think professional musician is really multifaceted. You have to do a lot of things, which is why we stress it's so important for our students from MSU that they be able to teach, that y'all be able to teach, that y'all be able to arrange, that, that you guys learn how to do, a lot of different things, entrepreneurship and, grant writing, all this sort of stuff. But at the center of it is still playing. Like, I think that's an important thing, is like at MSU, we still believe that the most important aspect of a professional musician is that they can play. That's going to get you the most opportunities. I doubt anyone's, filmmaker's gone into a club and be like, man, this band's sad. Man, ooh, that trumpet player, man, I wonder if he can score a film, Like,
Yeah.
never happened.
Man, he can't play. His writing must be great.
Right. No one's, it's been rare that someone's been like, oh my God, she can really not, piano playing's terrible, man. Maybe I'll get her to run my university. It doesn't work that way. I don't think it works that way. You get opportunities from your musicianship. So that's why lessons, being able to play, study the cats, your ability to know tunes, your ability to write music, to perform, to know how to be a musician in the professional sense. Your musicianship is going to open so many opportunities to allow those other streams of income to open up, to kind of like fill out your avatar, fill out your persona as a professional musician. Because I don't think it's just one thing. I guess that's my answer. And that's why it's hard to answer, because it's not really just one thing.
I guess in a more practical, instead of the big lofty question, what would you recommend for students trying to become professional musicians?
You got to find playing opportunities. You got to play. You got to play. You got to connect. You got to interact with people. Even that is a skill. You're not just going through the motions. You have to learn how to make connections with people. You got to learn how to talk with people. You got to, and it's back to that dignity. It's back to the respect and the honesty and the dignity. Be able to engage in a conversation, not so that they're just sitting there waiting for you to offend them. You got to learn how to build relationships. Talking with somebody and following up with them may lead to a gig, or may lead to a writing project, or may lead to something. Do your best to remember people. I'm terrible with names. I am absolutely terrible with names. So it's something that I know I need to remember. Because like I hate when people mess up my name. So I can only imagine how they feel when I completely forget theirs. And continue to grow as a musician. If musicianship is the most important thing, developing musician is the best thing for musicianship, is that it keeps on growing and it keeps on evolving. And then if you're not getting opportunities to, like, let's say, if you're not getting opportunities to arrange, just arrange something, put something out there, put something together, somebody will hear it.
Yeah.
If you're not getting opportunities to play in other people's band, start your own band, get a gig, put a gig together, advertise it, create some awareness, create some visibility. It's a little bit different than even when I was growing up. I mean, I think I was at the tail end of, find an older musician and apprentice under them. And then it's a little bit different than that. I think there was a generation of the young lions that aren't necessarily encouraging younger players like my generation to play with them. And I think the ones that do, like Carl and like Rodney and like, some of those, I've been able to play with them a little bit. But I think the generation under them, like maybe even like myself or Prof D's definitely, and Ulysses, they're starting to kind of reinvigorate the idea of taking in younger musicians and playing with them, en masse. I mean, you look at Ulysses' band and it's a lot of, young and up and coming musicians. Look at Prof Charles' band. It's a lot of young and up and coming musicians. You look at my band now, I hire a lot of students, and it's students that reach out to me that want to play. Like they want to play, so they reach out to me and we play together, and then they come out to me and they say, well, I want to learn some of your tunes. And so I bring my book to the rehearsal and we play and we practice. And then when I get a gig, that's who I call, because, they know my book already. So they keep getting the gig, I used to learn all of Prof Whitaker's tunes, and I knew the tunes that he liked to play. I would sometimes call his tunes before he would on gigs.
Ayo.
And I liked them and I liked playing them. And I think that's why I got opportunities. When I was a student, when I was finishing up as a student at MSU, I was in Octet 1 and Prof Whitaker directed it. He had a couple of octet charts, and I just started bringing charts to the rehearsal. I would just bring them to the band. He wouldn't ask me to do them. I'd just bring them. They were all right. You learn, and and they got better over time. And then when he had a project and he wanted to do something big, he wanted to do the Freedom Now suite at an MLK concert. I think at the second MLK concert. And he asked me to arrange it for octet. And so I arranged the whole suite for octet. And then I started getting more arranging work from him, and then kept on writing, and people just get a chance to hear your charts and they want to buy them. And then now it's become like a viable facet of my professional musicianship. So activity, visibility, persistence, it's just like practicing. Doing a little bit of work every month is better than doing a whole bunch of stuff in the month of January, and then just in February you get kind of like burned out by it. It's just
February Fury.
There's the February Fury. That's why I think practicing is so important for students, because it's a model for basically everything. Having some consistent, dedicated time every day, you're going to see the results after a week. You may not see the results in that day, or sometimes maybe not even that week, but after, you look up and you say, well, man, practice for 900 days in a row.
So, the phrase, everything is an audition, or you're always auditioning for the next gig. So you're like prime example of that. You started off as a student at State, you moved up to faculty, and everything kind of started from just like excelling first as a student at State. So can you elaborate on like that, the whole act of everything is an audition?
Yeah, I think I didn't really realize that I was auditioning. I was just trying to do my
Yeah.
best. Music was hard for me. Music was really hard for me. You know, it still is. It takes me a while to put things together. You know, when I came to Michigan State in 1995, you know, I wasn't very good. You know, I didn't really have a robust jazz experience or experience in jazz. You know, I didn't come from a powerhouse jazz high school. You know, nothing like Dillard or nothing like a lot of the schools that, you know, you see now, Byron Center or something, you know, those were pretty rare. And I wasn't a very good saxophone player. Talked to Professor Luloff. I had a lot to get together. And he got a lot together, man. He's an incredible teacher. Between him and Andrew Spade, you know, they really kicked my butt. But again, it was something that I could withstand. I don't think I was auditioning as much as I was just hungry, man. I just wanted
Yeah.
knowledge, and I was honest. I was honest about it. You know, I could take the tongue lashings, you know, and I think at a certain point I actually said, I was like, man, you know, you don't need to do that. I'll do whatever you want to do. You know, I don't need to be broken down and built back up. You know, and
Yeah.
just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Every situation that I went to, I just tried to do my best, and I tried to bring that sense of honesty and hard work. I think if I felt like it was an audition, or if I felt like, well, how they see me doing this is going to make or break their interaction with me, or I need to impress them, I personally can't do that honestly, because they're not meeting me, they're meeting my representative. Because I'm putting in front of them what I think they would want to see rather than who I actually am. And who I actually was somebody that was going to work hard, was going to listen, be respectful, and do my very best. I didn't have to look at one thing as an audition and one thing, because then, you know, if you look at things as kind of like an audition, and, you know, or if you look at things as like, well, this is, you know, really opportunistically, in that sense, then you kind of start to rank, you know, well, I can kind of blow this rehearsal off because I have this rehearsal at 5 that I really need to impress people with. Why not impress people? You know, it's just a lot easier just to be, you know, consistent through all of it. And I always tell my students, it's a similar thing. I think it's from the other side. Like, you know, everything is an audition. I believe that. I believe that, but I don't treat it that way. What I tell my students is, like, you know, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. The way you deal with scales is the way that you're going to deal with, you know, this solo. You may be more enthusiastic, but like what you don't realize is that the way that you deal with learning your scales with a sense of integrity and a sense of honesty and a sense of hard work and a sense of clarity is ultimately the way that you're going to play. No matter how much more you want to play than how much you want to practice your scales, the way you do one thing is the way you do everything. You know, you may want on different levels, but the way you actually do things, there's a consistency that you don't realize actually exists. I mean, you guys know that. Yeah, I'm sure you guys have found that to be true. And be like, well, when I started taking care of everything or other things, everything started to kind of like cool out, or everything started to get better.
Can you talk a little bit more on consistency? You've mentioned it a couple times, but I'm just curious to how you think consistency plays in.
And then even on top of that, like, how can we work on being consistent?
Exactly.
It's discipline, and discipline's a choice. Discipline's not a talent. You're not blessed with discipline. It's just you make the decision to do something or not. That's the first thing, is like, you have the choice to be disciplined. It's hard to do, and it's a hard choice to make. You know, it's hard to consistently make that choice to do something, you know, on a consistent basis. But it's beneficial. And I think, you know, it's so tough, because consistency in the way that I'm talking about it and the way I think that we're discussing it, it's hard to see the results immediately. And consistency is because things take so long to develop and so long to build. You know, you really have to have faith in the process. And I think once you get that first piece of evidence, or that first experience that shows you, hey man, this actually works. Like, if I stick with this, you know, things get easier. Then you become hungry for it, and you just, it's a lot easier to achieve. And it's not even necessarily in the way that you think. I mean, and again, I tell my students this all the time. Not everything is a one-to-one relationship. Listening to Dexter Gordon, you know, for an hour a day may not help you play like Dexter Gordon. It may just help you listen better. Or playing transcriptions every day may not give you more language. It may make you a better sight reader. So not everything's a one-to-one relationship. Even in life, being more respectful and trying to practice good manners and good citizenship may not get you more opportunities, you know, in terms of connections or networking, but it may make you a better listener on the bandstand, more respectful and understanding of things that are going on in the bandstand. But it's something that you have to work towards for a long period of time, in order to understand the benefits. And again, it starts with the choice. I mean, you got to make the choice to do it. You know, with students, the first lesson of every student, they come in and I say, all right, how much are you practicing a day? And they throw out some outrageous number. And then I say, well, all right, well, let's sit down, let's schedule. So I'll sit down with them and I have a grid that I pull out every fall and I put in their classes, and then their classes are there. And then I say, well, you know, during this time, what do you do? Well, I shed. I said, well, when do you eat? Like, well, I mean, I guess I grab something quick. And I said, you don't hang out with your friends at lunch? So I guess I do. I said, all right, well, that's fine. You know, and there's kind of like surprise when I actually have them schedule in like their hang time or schedule in, you know, because, you know, I don't expect them to practice all the time. I certainly didn't, you know, and practicing all the time is not necessarily the only thing that helped me as a musician, like learning how to interact with people or, you know, having friends, you know, learning how to maintain friendships. As you grow older, that's a different dynamic. Some musicians, sometimes they still interact with their friends like they're teenagers because they were in the shed the whole time. They didn't really understand how to have like a 25-year-old relationship.
Yeah.
A friendship, you know, they still, you know, it's a 16-year-old friendship. So we schedule in all of our times and I say, all right, look, you have some dedicated time where you can actually practice every day. But the thing is, you know, and it's not just like it's not like mortar in your schedule, just filling in all the cracks with practicing. You have to have some set time to practice every day. But that time needs to be as immovable, like it would be absurd if I said, well, I got to make time today to go to this class. Like you wouldn't say that. Or it's like if you have a job, you would be like, man, I got to figure out how I'm going to make time today to go to my job. Maybe if I have some time, maybe I'll go to my job if I can steal some time away. But what do? We always, that sounds absurd, but you always do, like students generally, a lot of times they'll do the opposite. Be like, well, man, I got to make time to practice. That, even to me, like as a student, that sounded absurd to me. Like when I was starting off, I was just like, this is what I do. So you got to make time for other things. You know, practicing is a part of what you do. It's as immovable as a class. It's as immovable as a job. It's as immovable as something fixed in your time. And that's the way you got to look at it. So I think consistency starts with a perspective. And the two things are, you know, it's a decision. Consistency is really just a decision you make. And then how you perceive the thing that you want to do consistently. It has to be something that's as fixed in your life as anything else. Yeah. As class, you know, if you're a student, as class, and if you're adult, you know, as a job, or as, you know, you got to do that. You got to treat it like that. And it changes. And again, if you start treating your practice time as a part of your professional musicianship, you'll get better, but the benefits will be, well, wow, they're really serious about everything that they do. That's somebody I want to work with. Because not only is the musicianship on a high level, because they've been practicing on a consistent basis and getting a lot of things together, but also just like their attitude, you know, their attitude towards musicianship, they're on a serious level. They're going to take care of business. And as you guys have found out, sometimes that's a tall order, just to be cool, just to be on a, you know, I was on a gig recently, you know, no one's on a gig recently.
Yeah.
Back in 2019.
Where the band leader came up after rehearsal and just hugged me. Thank you, man. I was like, no problem. Thank you, you know. And then the second day, thank you, man. I was like, you know, I appreciate it. You know, what am I doing? You know, I want to know. Is it just being cool, man? I was like, wow, it's a low bar, but it's achievable, you know. But you know, it goes a lot. It goes a long way. It goes a long way, man.
Yeah. Like, I have a question for you about your own project. So first of all, can you tell us about your records and where we can buy them?
The first record I did was self-released, and it's, you see,
hey,
all those in the back right there.
Oh. So what's your email then is the question.
The first thing that I learned was, you know, the first record taught me a couple of things, you know, most of which is hire a publicist. Advertise your records. Don't buy more than you can sell. Don't print more than you can conceivably sell. And that was called Hercules. And it was basically the result of a band that I put together when I first started teaching at Michigan State. And it included John Nam, who's a pianist, professor of jazz piano in South Korea. And at the time he was doing his master's at U of M, we got introduced and he came and sat in. I had a gig in East Lansing, and, you know, we put together a band. Andrew Klein, who was a bass player in New York, and Lawrence Leathers, who, I had known we kind of grew up together in Lansing. And so the four of us had put together a band, and we had a weekly gig in East Lansing. We did other gigs and, played festivals around the state and things like that. So it was easy. It was really easy to go into the studio and make the record, because it was basically just a documentation of the things that we were doing at the time. And it was all original music. The second record, it's entitled The Contender. That was in 2013. And that was actually, Prof D's had a lot to do with that. He encouraged me to do a record. It was released on his label. He helped produce it, and was responsible for getting a lot of the musicians together for the date. Again, all my compositions and arrangements. And what I found out is that your second record sells your first. There actually used to be a lot more of those. A lot more of those. I hired a radio publicist. I got somebody to promote the record, and it made it to, I think, number 8 on the jazz radio charts. It was well received. I mean, people liked the record. It was a great record, and I had a lot of fun making it. I signed a few years ago with Positone Records. We worked together on my first release for them, entitled Connections. And again, it's a combination of original compositions and arrangements. All of them are available on iTunes, and Connections is available directly from Positone's website. All the records are available on my website as well, DiegoRiveraJazz.com.
Bam.
I've always liked the idea of records being kind of like a snapshot of where I am musically, compositionally, artistically, and all of those sort of things. I just wish that there were more of them. I actually have another record in the can that we were supposed to release this summer, but we decided just to wait on it, because usually I like scheduling gigs around a release so that you can bring the music to the people and they can hear it live and then take it home with them at the end of the gig. And this latest project is called Indigenous, and it's a project that I've wanted to do for some time. It's a collection of music that's inspired by other cultures and other types of music around the world. There's a Greek song, very popular Greek song, my wife used to sing to our kids as a lullaby. So I heard it every night, and like any musician, if you hear a song enough, you have to write or you have to play it, or else it's going to drive you mad. So I wrote an arrangement of it, a light reharmonization. I arranged it for quartet. There's another song that was introduced to me, or that I found as I was doing research for a visit from Anat Cohen. At the time, I was researching songs of peace, prayer, and protest from around the world, and I found this song, Shir LaShalom, and it's a song for peace. It was actually commissioned by the Israeli Defense Forces. So this was a military arm of Israel that had commissioned this songwriter to write a song that turned out to actually be like an anti-war song, anti-war protest song. So I thought how forward-thinking that was, that a military body would endorse a song that talked about the effects of war, the effects of military action, the detriment, that it leaves on a nation. So it's powerful. I think you were on that tour, right, Gina, with Anat?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And did you do that one with us, or?
Yes, I did. Shir LaShalom.
You remember that, because we had the first rehearsal in Detroit.
Yep.
At the Car Center.
Mm-hmm.
And I had mentioned that, I said, well, I have an arrangement of Shir LaShalom. She was like, really? That's,
yeah,
hilarious, man. We played it for her. And then I remember we had to take a moment. She got she started to well up, just because the way that I had kind of conceptualized in my head, the way that I explained it to you guys, and then the way that you guys performed it, it really moved her. And so that's when I had the idea. I was like, man, I should do a whole record of music from around the world in a jazz context, because jazz musicians will be drawn towards it for the things that are consistent, and the things that they identify within jazz music. But actually, the music itself would be more impactful for the people who are indigenous from where the music actually came from. And there are a couple of songs that I've rearranged or arranged for jazz quartet that I've been able to perform in Greece, and it's been very well received. I'm a little nervous. Sometimes you don't want to step on the line of culturally appropriating somebody else's music, but that's not what I was trying to do. I'm trying to I learned a lot about the music and the history and the composer and the message, and I try to reinterpret it. And so it's been thankfully it's been very well received. So I'm trying to do all this music that's inspired from places all around the world. And so that's what Indigenous is, and should be coming out soon. I don't know. Hopefully, you got to see how things go.
On that same note, you mentioned a couple things that you do already, but what do you do to ensure that you're paying homage and respect to the source material that you're using for something like that?
Lots of research, not only about the music, but about, also about the culture. What were some of the conditions surrounding the culture and the nation and the country, when the song was written? There's a lot of peripheral kind of like research to make sure that you're kind of capturing or holding true to the original intent and the original message of the song. With Shir LaShalom, I studied a lot about, the Israeli Defense Forces and how they came to be, and, and Israel's, a little bit about Israel's military history. Asata Malak Yasu, the Greek song, I'd studied about the composer, and he was a film scorer. He had written this song, and he tried to sell it to some of the movie houses. And they say, well, there's no way, it's not catchy enough. And so he kind of like put it away for a long time. Or no, he tried to, not movie houses, but he tried to sell it to publishers. And publishers were just like, no, nobody's going to, buy this. No one's going to perform this. And so his filmmaker is making this movie. He's looking for music. And so he contacts, this composer, and he says, well, I have this song, that I've kind of put away for a long time. Maybe you want to listen to it. And so he uses it in the movie, and it becomes just a national hit. So it's something that people identify with, transcends generations. It's not general, but in general, we're the only ones, like us being the US, we're the only ones that really subscribe as heavily as we do to that concept of like generational music. It doesn't really exist the way it does here in other places. It was something that when I performed it in Greece, man, people my age, people a lot older than me, and some people, even younger than me, they all seem to kind of like connect with it, albeit in a different way, because they're different age groups, but it was something that they all connected with. Like the concept of, oh, that's my dad's music, that's my mom's music, it's my grandparents' music. It doesn't really exist other places the way it does here. It's a real thing here. So I tried not to pick quote unquote generational music. I wanted to pick something that more than just one kind of strata of, or one stream of folks could identify with.
The first record you said was self-produced, and then the most recent, except this one that hasn't been released, Connections, was Positone. Can you walk us through like the way it was different recording that first record to the second record to the third to the one that hasn't been released yet?
The first record really wasn't, there was no rehearsal. We just did a bunch of gigs leading up to it. I knew I set a record date, and I tried to schedule as many gigs as I could leading up to it. So there was no real rehearsal. There was no like passing out charts or doing it. We didn't have any music in the studio, because we'd been playing the music. So I just counted off the tunes, and there wasn't really any discussion about form or anything, other than, I soloed, and I think we did all the tunes in order. We just, I think we just recorded basically our set. There's a tune that I use as like a sign-off tune, and it's split in half, because that's what I would use. So like in the middle of the record, you hear me start the tune, and then it kind of like fades out as I'm soloing. And that's kind of like the end of the first set. And then at the end of the record, it kind of fades in while we're playing. And then I take the melody out. We take the melody out, and that's kind of like the end of the records, because it's kind of like the end of the set. So it really was just like a recording of our set. So it was very just earthy, This is what we do. This is our band. This is what we do, The second record, we had a rehearsal the day before, and then we did the whole record in one day. I wrote charts. I don't think I even really sent them out to people. It was really just kind of like a reading session or a record, and showed up to rehearsal. Here's what we're doing. And then we did it. Took one day. The charts were well constructed. They were clean. They were easy to read. Roadmap was clear. And I think it made everything easy, and everybody had a good time. It was such a good band too. Ulysses and Prof Whitaker and Mickey and Giz and Prof D's and Ben Galise came in for a little while, and it was such a good vibe. It was a really easy record to make, and I hadn't had an extensive recording experience, certainly not with my own records sessions, but people kept saying, wow, this was actually, surprisingly really what we knocked out, like 11 or 12 tunes or something like that in one day.
Wow.
A couple takes of each. I think only one tune we did 3 takes of, and I think that was the first one. It was more just to get levels. And then the Connections was a similar thing. I'd written some music. A lot of people had input on putting together the band. There's a lot more different types of, it was everything from a quartet all the way up to an octet. the nucleus of the band was a sextet, really, with Prof D's, Joe Magnarelli, Luther Allison, Jason Tiemann, and India Owens. That was kind of like the nucleus of the band. And then we added some folks and took some folks out and stuff like that. But again, we had a rehearsal the day before. I was really big on making sure that the charts were clean, they looked good, the roadmap was easy. Then we went in the next day, recorded, knocked out all the tunes. And again, it was just a really fun session, no vibe. And I think that's helpful, because if people are in a place where they feel good about the music, they're going to contribute, they're going to do things well, And then with Indigenous, it was the same thing. Positone helped put together the band. I had this body of music that I'd been wanting to do for a long time, but as a collection of music. We had the rehearsal, and then the next day we went into the studio and locked it all down. It was a little unnerving, because it was, I think, only a day or two after Lawrence had been murdered. So it was rough for me to get through that session, because I was thinking about, Lawrence. But the cats were really supportive, and everybody was really cool. And I felt like everybody really contributed to the completion of the project. And they wanted it to be good. And as a band leader, I think that's the most important thing. That's the thing that's most important to me, is just like, I just want everybody to want it to be good. I don't mind folks speaking up and changing things if they, I'm not a bass player. If Boris Kozlov has a better idea for a bass line, I'm going to take it. If Rodney Whitaker has a better idea for a bass line, I'm going to take it. But I think the thing that was a consistent through all of those was I always had a story with every tune that I was doing. There was always a narrative. There was always a story. There was always kind of like something to point to. This tune is about this. This tune is about this. Sometimes even if it was thin, look, this tune, I just wanted to write some triads and put them together in something swinging.
Yeah.
Like, okay, swing and play some triads. Sometimes they're real deep. This is a song about family history and about death. And it's, so there was a narrative. And I think taking the time to explain that, showed that I cared about the music and hopefully inspired the musicians to care about it,
Do you have any advice for young professionals who are going into recording their own albums and or going into record for other people?
There's some things that you do the same. You want to be prepared. You want to come in with a good attitude, concentrate, put away your phone, any other sort of distractions as best as you can. Life is full of ongoing conversations and conflicts and that sort of stuff. So do your best to kind of like forget that. So, man, I'm fighting with my wife or my girlfriend or my boyfriend, or fighting with my my parents, or my roommates freaking out, or that stuff's just gonna happen. Or, man, gonna hang out with so and so, or I got this. You gotta try to just block all that out and focus in on the music. There's nothing really as important as what you're doing at that time. The music needs all of your attention, whether it's your record or somebody else's record. And I haven't even talked about solos. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's why my solos don't sound so good on my records. But like, it's like you don't have to take the solo. You just have to take a solo. For me, I mean, because like I'm really big on. I just wanted to represent where I'm at, what I'm doing, and I think that for me that helps relieve some pressure. I mean, what I'm doing is what I've done, and then all the other things that go along with just being respectful, just being honest, and just respecting dignity. Listen when somebody's talking, just listen, because that's the difference between, oh, I didn't know we were doing that, and nailing it on the first take and be like, man, that was killing. Now let's just do another one just to do it. You don't have to be belligerent, just make sure that you're focused in and that you're having fun, that you're having a good time, staying in the moment, staying present. On your records, I think it's important to have a narrative, to have a story, to have something, kind of like a rallying point for everybody, a vision or a direction that everybody can follow or can go towards. In somebody else's recording session, try to get to that. If you can do it in a non-obtrusive way, and say, what's this tune about? Where'd you get? Is this about something? Is there a story behind this one? If they say no, it means that no. If they say that there is, listen to it and try to let that inspire you. That's the importance of listening to a lot of different records and a lot of different things. What's the difference between sadness and romance? If you've listened to enough records, you can hear the difference. What's the difference between, loss and death? What's the nuanced difference between death and remembrance? How do you reminisce about somebody, and how do you lose somebody? There's a difference between grieving and cherishing memories. If you listen to enough records, you're going to be able to understand what that means. You're going to be able to attach a musical reality to an emotion that's spoken, or that's described, to emotional label. I'm not necessarily opposed to emotional labels as it relates to writing tunes or talking about tunes, but there needs to be some sort of like musical reality attached to that. That's why it's important to listen to all types of music, man, just to listen to all types of things.
A lot of our audience are musicians, specifically bass trombonists, who haven't really improvised before, but are interested in it. So I'm curious, as someone who's worked with so many people who play all sorts of different instruments, including bass trombone, what do you suggest for people who are just getting started at improvising?
Just snuck it in there.
It's really organic. Just find somebody that plays the way that you like, get familiar with them, listen to their records, try to listen to them as much as possible, and then try to play like them. If you want to use the word transcribe, sure. If you want to use the word learning solos, sure. Mimicking is usually the first way to do it. If you can't mimic them directly, you got to find out what are the obstacles to keep you from sounding like somebody, or even getting close, or even just getting your foot in the door. You don't have to learn entire solos. Just learn some things and start piecing together words here and there, sentences, phrases. And yeah, I think everybody needs to have a cat. Everybody needs to, it's like, man, Gina Benalcazar is my cat. Chris Glassman is my cat. That's who I'm checking out. Everybody needs to have a cat because it personifies it. It humanizes it, the music. It's not a study of the architecture. It's a study of, the art. And then find a mentor and have them teach you some stuff. Have them teach you about the architecture. Look, this is how it's put together. These are some things you got to do, do everything your teacher says. As a student, unless you can do everything that your teacher says, there's really no place for questioning how that information is going to benefit you. If you can't do it, you're not even in position. As a teacher, if you're not giving your students useful information, you're not in a position to tell them that they're not doing well. If they're not learning the information, that's on you. And that's the thing. It's equally the student's responsibility to learn the information as it is you as a teacher to make sure that they actually learn it. You can't just assign it and then run away from it. As an educator and as a mentor, you got to make sure that you got to follow through on the idea that, look, I want you to learn this. Well, have you? Well, where are the obstacles? Let me help you. Let me help you learn it. You can't just throw the rock and run.
You had this exercise that you talk about in pedagogy because a lot of the students are beginning improvising, and you were talking, it was like a blues exercise, the call and response. Can you talk to us about that exercise?
Yeah, the call and response exercise teaches a lot of things. It teaches you how to hear in 2-bar phrases, and ultimately in 4-bar phrases, and ultimately in an entire form. Because a lot of times young improvisers or beginning improvisers, one of the biggest things is they say, well, I get lost. What I realized, or what I figured out what that was, is they would just get lost in phrases. Like they couldn't feel 2 bars at a time. They couldn't feel 4 bars at a time. So ultimately they would get lost. They would just lose their sense of direction, or, that sort of thing. There's usually a response phrase that's set up, and you can take it from somebody setting up, a teacher, a group leader, something like that. Or if you find, from a solo, you find a good 2-bar phrase that speaks to you, you set that up. And so you improvise for 2 bars, obeying the laws of harmony and melody and good time and all that sort of stuff, whatever you would like to deal with in that first 2 bars, and then always answer with the same phrase. Over the 4 chord, measures 5 and 6, improvising there, measures 7 and 8, you have that same answer phrase. And so you're constantly going between a 2-bar improvisation and a 2-bar answer phrase. 2-bar improvisation, 2-bar answer phrase. And then eventually what you do is you improvise the call and you improvise the response. Improvise the call and improvise the response. Improvise the call and so you start to put together 2-bar phrases and then try to do it 4 bars at a time. Start off with something secure for 4 bars and then improvise for 4 bars and then have a set turn back idea. Right? And just keep that. So there needs to be some consistency in the form that gives you something, there needs to be mile markers, some checkpoints that you can check in with, and that helps to teach you, how to feel 4 bars at a time. And eventually, once you take away all of the bumpers in the lanes, you'll be able to keep your bearings.
You just dropped like the perfect Instagram 1 minute, 30-second educational clip right there.
Yeah. So you're like the king. You taught me that you can arrange something in one day. Because before you, I don't think I ever thought that you could do that. So first of all, can you talk to us about your arranging process? You have an expansive, like a big band, octet, small group stuff, arranging all the time. Can you talk about the process of arranging, and then just like a little snippet in like quick arranging, like what's that whole thing about?
Again, arranging for me was like trial by fire, but it wasn't really. It was trial by smoldering coals, because Prof Whitaker was really trial by embers. Because Prof Whitaker was very, very supportive, and really anybody. Actually, my first big band arrangement was while I was still a student. Wycliffe Gordon, if he had gigs or something like that, if he had out of town business, he would put me in charge of the band. And so we were getting close to a concert and we didn't have one chart. So I said, well, let me bring one chart. We were one chart short. So I wrote a chart and I brought it in, we rehearsed it, and we did it on the concert. So that was my first. And the way I got into that is I got like 3 or 4 Duke Ellington scores that I was really familiar with the music. I think Take the A Train, In a Mellow Tone, the Peanut Brittle Brigade from the Tchaikovsky's Nutcracker.
Yeah.
And I got those scores and I just looked at how things were put together. If we rewind a little bit, a gentleman by the name of Lewis Smith, great trumpet player, one of Randy Napoleon's biggest and dearest mentors. I asked him how he arranged or how he learned to arrange. And what he would do is he said, well, he had good penmanship. He had good, manuscript. So he would take scores and he would copy the parts for older musicians, from these scores that they had. And by doing that, he kind of got a sense of like how things were put together and how how arrangements were put together and how, the voicings and that sort of thing. And, all right, trombone should be written in this register. Trumpets seem to be kind of written in this register. Saxophones seem to do these kind of things. And rhythm section parts kind of look like this. So I took that to heart. So I said, well, I want to write a big band chart. Let me look at how they put that together. So I studied those things, and some chords were just taken note for note, and some schemes were taken call and response, and the brass are in unison, the saxophones are harmonized, and then vice versa, and then the dialogue. And so it was basically just a big conglomeration of a bunch of things that I just stole from these 3 charts, and it worked out. Having the opportunity to arrange, I think, was most beneficial for me. Like I had an octet that I could arrange for. I had a big band that I could write charts for, and they could just hear them anytime. That was really beneficial for me, and I think that encouraged me to write more. I mean, the process just got shorter just because, I got used to doing it. I think the biggest thing that helped my process was just making a decision, because anyone that's gotten into arranging knows that, there's more than, there's an infinite number of combinations for like voicings and chords and reharms and all this sort of stuff. But you can only really do one thing at a time. You can't really get like 7 big bands to play this 7 different chords that you have in your head. You only have one big band in there. You only have one group. So just kind of like sitting down and making a decision, I think, is just the most important thing, because you can always go back and fix it, or and then really getting interested in arranging as kind of like a set of chops. Listening to lots of big bands, having some favorite arrangers like Quincy Jones, Thad Jones, Nelson Riddle, Oliver Nelson, man, God. Billy Childs, deep, man, Bad Cat, John Clayton. I'm just picking out. You just go on and on. But becoming a fan of arranging, kind of a student of arranging. So those things, kind of like doing score study, listening to cats, and really just making a decision. That's kind of like my process. That's my process, kind of putting those 3 things together.
And so you're also the king of getting the gig on the bandstand. Like you'll come into the band and you'll be like playing your saxophone, and then next gig, bam, the musical director, blah, 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 and our band arranger is Diego Rivera. So first of all, how does this happen all the time? And how do we get those gigs? And then like, how do you get known for your writing specifically? Because I think it's easier if you're playing, people are hearing you, so you can just go to like a jam session, you can go to the show, you have these gigs, but it's a lot harder to get known for your writing. How do you do that? And you do it all the time.
I don't know. Just put music in front of people. In some cases, ask. Some cases, ask.
Yeah. Wow.
You like some charts for the band? Would you like me to write something for this concert? Sometimes they have money for it. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they say, well, we don't really have any money for it. And if that's okay with you, then that's fine. Okay. But at least they know that, that you're interested in writing and doing some work. Yeah. I don't know. I don't really go into the situation and be like, I want to be the writer for this band.
It just
you know.
happens though every time.
I same thing. It's like, you know, I'm honest. I would love to write for the band. I would love to write. I like to write, you know. I'm honest and I'm respectful, and if there's an opportunity for me to write, I'd love to write for the group, you know. Let me know. And I think I'm well practiced enough to know that when I say it, they say, "All right, well, it's honest," and they mean it. Because I'm not out of practice of BSing. I don't think I'm smart enough to play mind games. It takes too much effort. Like I don't have that. I can't commit to playing, you know, figuring out, you know, well, I'm going to say this thing, but what I really believe is this. Mm-hmm. And if I can keep all these separate things separated, I wouldn't be able to, they would just kind of run into each other. I'm doing so much stuff and I'm going. I wouldn't be able to keep all that separate. So if I want to write something, if I, you know, I let folks know. And if they say yes, they get the full treatment, man. They get the full, and I probably shouldn't say this publicly. It doesn't matter how much they're paying me. You know, it's like they get the full effort. Because like I don't know how to do it. Because then again, you know, it's back to that thing, you're kind of like always auditioning. I never know who's going to be listening to it. I never know who's going to hear the work, which makes me a little bit kind of overzealous. And sometimes, you know, in my work, it was like, it has to get right. It has to do right. You know, and something I got to fix is sometimes when I'll write right down to a deadline, because I'm always working on it and I'm always trying to, you know, even in the middle of a project, I'll try to learn more, you know, and I want to try to use it. All the same things about professionalism apply. Be respectful, be honest, do your best to turn things in on time, make sure they're high quality, and just be a good person. Be gracious.
So, wrapping up, 2 final questions for you. First off, how can students get in contact with you for some lessons?
They can contact me through my website. I can be reached at diegoriverajazz.com. Or they can just go to my website, and I think I actually have a contact link. They can go there.
Dig. And then also, final advice for any students that are interested in applying to MSU.
Find the major professor on your instrument, shoot them an email. We're all very, very nice people. Just reach out to us and, you know, follow some of the advice that I've given. Just be respectful, be honest, and you'll see that you'll get honesty and respect in return. Don't give up on your dream. If it's your dream to become a musician, you think MSU is the place for you, you know, don't give up on it.
One last final thought from me, coming from a student at MSU who had the pleasure to study with you and all the amazing faculty, that you have been such a great professor. So anybody hearing this,
yes,
email him.
Send an email.
Now, rewind and write down the list of composers that he just said a second ago when he was talking about arranging.
That's right.
I appreciate it, you guys.
We appreciate
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Proud of y'all. Keep doing what you're doing, making the world a safe place for bebop.
Yeah.
Safe place for bebop.
I have one question.
Sure.
Is that screaming a cat or a kid?
I think that's a child.
Okay, I was like, I'm not sure if there's a cat in
I'm allergic to cats, but I'm also allergic to screaming, so
Chris has
stay
a cat,
out of there.
So I couldn't tell which microphone it was coming out of. All right, well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank
we
you.
Really appreciate you. Can we get a bye, guys, for everyone? Bye, guys, or bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.
Later, y'all.
Okay, bye, Prof.
Bye.
Bye.